Look, I don't mean to get political, but you're definitely going to want to check out this market update. Hey guys, welcome back. It's the February market update for Brook Team. And like I said, I don't mean to get political here, but have you ever turned on the news one day since January and not thought to yourself, am I living in the real world? It feels like every single day something new is happening around the globe that President Trump is involved in, and it feels like it's affecting not only the prices of groceries and everything else, but it's affecting the real estate market, the interest rate market, the renters market, the new construction market, and the whole world right now is waiting to see what's going to happen. So let's break it down. What's happening now in the real estate market? All right, so the first thing that's happening right now is it feels like there's tariffs on tariffs on tariffs, one going over to this country and then the next day, just kidding, we're not going to do that. Now, whether or not you agree with this current administration and what they're doing, the fact of the matter is it's impacting the real estate market. So right now it's February at the time of this filming, and February over the last 4 years, and in fact even going further, has been the lowest point for median sales prices in the New England area. After that, all of a sudden it ticks up again, and you're going to see in March, April, May, June, all the way up to typically July is when we have our highest points of sales as we kick off basically past the Super Bowl into the real spring market. This is when sellers get their houses on the market. This is when buyers start to get really excited. Mortgages start to tick up, and all of a sudden we start having people trying to move before the next school year. That's what happens every year. But this year, it's a little bit different. So what's happening this year? Well, right now, you've got this cooling that's happening in the rental market. And what do I mean by that? Well, over the past several years, multifamily has been one of the hottest commodities out there for people to build. If you build multifamily, you could resell that multifamily. I'm not talking 2, 3 families, 4 families. I'm talking about 50 unit, 100 unit, 250 unit or more buildings for people to live in. Those are super hot. And what would end up happening is these contractors would build these buildings, and the developers would build them and resell them. And that became so hot that there's all of a sudden all these developments that started to come up nationwide. Well, just like supply and demand that we talk about all the time here on these market updates, supply has been growing and growing and growing, which means that those rental prices are starting to having to come down recently, and they've dropped about 0.5%, and which is causing renters to have a couple more options. We've got more supply, and so they're deciding, well, maybe that rental prices will start to cool as landlords will drop the prices in order to get more renters in there. Well, how does that affect the real estate sales market? Well, with renters having more options and more units available, and typically that would also cause the real estate prices to increase just not as much. Why? Because people have options. They're going to compare the price of renting to the price of owning a home and the benefits accordingly, and they're going to have to weigh those up. Now, if they're also having the issue where there's not a lot of inventory in the real estate sales market, but a lot more inventory in the rental market, they may just choose to rent. Now, is that the right thing? Well, that's up to you. You get to decide that for your family. If you've got questions about renting or buying, we've got a couple of resources below in the description. I'd love for you to check that out. And by the way, right now is a great time to subscribe to this channel for awesome real estate market update news. So what's happening right now with the residential real estate market? Well, like I said, not a whole lot of inventory available, so those prices keep rising. It sounds like a mantra that we keep repeating over the last 3 years, and we see no end in sight for that. Unless the government was to get involved and either incentivize sellers in some capacity, or tell them there's no capital gain tax, or give sellers some sort of a break, we're really not seeing as much inventory come back to the market. Now, in 2025, we're supposed to have a little bit more inventory come back as people are kind of getting into that acceptance stage of saying, you know what, we're not going to get these 3% mortgages anymore. We're not going to get 4% mortgages anymore. We might take high 5s, mid 6s, and that's really what's happening right now. Those 7% interest rates have cooled back down a little bit, and now we're heading towards the 6s. So what's going to happen moving forward? Well, number one, new construction's been super hot. People are considering building a house because they can't find one that's already built, and they might face multiple offers with that. So new construction has continued to take off, but those prices, because of these tariffs, are starting to get into question. Why? Well, we get lumber from Canada, and although President Trump wants us to get everything from inside of our country, still it affects our building prices today, and so you might see new construction start to cool later on into this year. So is it a good time to buy a house right now? Absolutely, it's a good time to buy a house, because as we've seen over the past 3 years, supply and demand drives it, and we see no reason that supply is going to increase while demand has continued to increase as well. So is it a good time to sell a house? Well, you kind of have to line up the pieces. It really is a puzzle right now. It's not that you can't sell your house pretty quick, it's where are you going to go, and does the monthly payment make sense? which is where I'm gonna end this market update. Number one, if you've been considering about selling your house, but you've considered and said, hey, you know what? I don't want to give it my 3.5% interest rate or my 4% interest rate. I want you to consider something right now called a blended interest rate. And that blended interest rate is the total sum that you're paying towards any debts that you have out there. So consider and go with me from here. It's known right now that there's never been more debt on the American people, never been less in their savings account, but also never, on the opposite side, never been more equity in their homes. Said another way, your home's value is probably more than you bought it for, which means that you've got a lot more equity in it. But the consumers are feeling really pressed by all of this inflation, which means that their budget's a little bit tighter, which means you're not saving as much, which means for yourself you might put a little bit more on your credit card. Now those credit card bills, although President Trump and Senator Sanders, Bernie Sanders wants to pull those back and try to cap those interest rates, that hasn't happened yet. And so right now we've got interest rates for credit cards that might be at 20%, 28%, 30% for these interest rates. And so people might have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on credit cards. They might be paying towards student loans that they thought were going to be forgiven from the past administration that never did. They might be thinking to themselves, you know, I've got a car loan which is at 7% or 8% interest rates because that's where car loans went over the last few years. And so while they have an interest rate for their mortgage, which might be a $250,000 or $300,000 mortgage at 3% or 4%, the other part of their debt, which affects their monthly payment, might be at 20% for credit cards, or 7% for cars, or 5% for student loans. So what happens is when you do some math on this and you look at your blended interest rate, you might be actually paying a monthly payment towards those debts closer to a blended rate of 5%, 6%, 7%, or even more. So by some people considering to sell their house and reconsolidate their debt, they're actually able to put more money back in their pocket. So they're able to sell their house, buy a new house, and have their monthly payment, their monthly obligations reduced. And that's been a huge game changer for a lot of people right now. They're taking all that equity that they normally don't have access to, and they've been deploying it to pay off all that debt and to be able to, yes, get an interest rate that might be in the 5s or 6s or 7s, but as a whole, their monthly obligations towards their family output is going to be a lot less because they've been able to pay off that debt. They've been able to get a monthly payment that makes sense for them. And on top of it, they're even put some cash in their pocket, which makes them feel a little bit more secure. You may be thinking for yourself, it's a bad time to buy or it's a great time to buy. If you want more information for yourself, for your area, for your situation, I'd love for you to reach out to a Brook Team agent. More information on that below. If this video has been of value to you, then go ahead and click that subscribe button, especially if you're looking for more content as a team leader to grow a profitable team or as a real estate agent just to get started in your business with top tips. Thanks so much for watching.